Good morning. My name's Suzanne Hume and I've got the pleasure to read the Bible for us this morning. We're reading from Revelation chapter 7, verse 9 and 10. It's on page 865 of the Bibles or on the screen. Revelation chapter 7, 9 and 10. After this, I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands. And they cried out in a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb."
When I was growing up, my dad ran a business importing goods for a florist industry. And I used to go in and help. It was nice to be involved in my dad's work. He used to include us and involve us in the work. So when I was a little child, I'd go out to Homebush where there was the factory, and then he'd pass me these bags of 1,000 card forks, and I had to count them into little bundles of 100, and I'd get paid for every little bundle that I made. It was great to be involved in my dad's work, but the best part was when he went traveling the world because he had to find new goods to import, and we'd get on the aeroplane and we'd go overseas for a holiday with him. It's the same for my own kids. It's great that they get to be involved in their father's work. In the last term, we've been running Christianity Explored at our house, and my kids have been joyfully running around, vacuuming the house, writing name tags, putting out the food, and when everyone arrives, they're handing out the name tags, and they might even stick around for a bit to hear what the adults are talking about. Of course, their involvement in my work means that they also get to enjoy my long service leave, which starts at the end of this week, and so they're getting a whole term away from school, which is very exciting. It's great to be involved in your father's work, and in a similar way, it's great for us as a church that we can be involved in God's work, that we can have a part and a privilege in being involved in our Father's work. We often call God our Father in heaven, and He's a good Father, and He has good work to do. And I know that we can't take for granted that we always appreciate the work of our fathers on earth, or we love joining in, because sometimes it's not straightforward. Sometimes we have complex family dynamics. But the thing we know about our Father in heaven is He is a good Father, and He's doing good work, and it's a real privilege to be involved in His work. Revelation 7 is a picture of what He's working towards. Our reading today is a picture of where things are headed, what God is building. It's a picture of the end result of His work, that there'll be a multitude that no one can count, gathered from all different languages and tribes and nations, and they'll be standing before God with joy and happiness, singing songs of celebration, songs of salvation. It's a really exciting thought that one day a multitude will gather before God with no more sadness, but we will be joyful. There'll be no more division, but we will be united as a community. No more loneliness, no more isolation, separation, but one new community. And that as we walk through heaven and up through the gates and up to the mountain to meet with God, we will be under His protection so that He will look after us. There will be no more suffering. There will be no more evil. There will be no more death. And there will be no more tears as He wipes the tears from our eyes. Our chapter is a great picture of God's fatherly care as He draws us to Himself in heaven. And it says at the end of our chapter, "He who sits on the throne will shelter them with His presence. Never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes." This is such an idyllic picture of where things are headed. This is such great anticipation of what God's working towards, and it is a privilege to be involved in that work. That we can help people to come away from loneliness, that we can help people to come away from isolation, that we can help people to come up to God, to meet with God's people, and to come up away from suffering and the challenges of this life, to meet with God in heaven on that final day and have eternal joy and songs of salvation and celebration. Wouldn't it be great to one day stand there in that multitude and to look around and to see people that you've invited to come and be a part of God's kingdom? That's why I love Yolanda's story. That was a great interview, wasn't it? I said to Leo, hey Leo, can you just take me through the Chinese ministry? Who has had their life changed by God's salvation? And he listed a number of people that their lives have been changed. And I said, and as he listed them, I asked for their backstory one by one. And 4 people that were baptized last year were connected to Yolanda. And for me, that was precious because it was just a few years ago that we baptized Yolanda. We walked to a pool just down the road here to someone's backyard, and we baptized Yolanda. And you saw the smile on her face that she is involved in God's salvation. And now we're hearing that the gathered becomes the gatherer, that people from all nations are coming to God and gathering more people from all nations. It's so good, and yet it's only a small taste of what's up ahead. Because what we've heard today is that God is gathering multitudes, a multitude. And you can see this in our reading, so let's go back over it. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. This is the generosity of God. He is gathering heaps and heaps and heaps of people, a multitude from all these different places. And it says the crowd's so big, no one can count it. So far in the Bible, we've heard about the feeding of 5,000. We've heard in the Old Testament, in the book of Numbers, that they counted 603,000 fighting men above 20. But this crowd in heaven is so big that no one can count it. The check-in systems are going to struggle. The name tags. You cannot count the size of this crowd. Sometimes we feel small and weak, like we're a little church here in the corner of a pocket of a city where there's a whole lot of people that don't take too big an interest in God. It's easy to feel defeated, weak and small. But one day, we're going to be part of this huge gathering that no one can count. It's going to be bigger than the biggest concert that you've ever been to. It's going to be bigger than any opening ceremony for an Olympic Games or any final of a World Cup. This is a large gathering that no one can count. So I was at a meeting recently where I was talking about some of the challenges being in a larger church. I was talking about how sometimes there's things that we try and do that it's hard to communicate about, it's hard to get everyone on the same page, it's hard for everyone to know what's going on. You can do 7 different channels of communication, someone turns up and says, I didn't hear about it. And so I was kind of commenting that it's hard to be part of a large church, and someone on the staff team corrected me. And I was really glad that they did. They said, what are you calling this a large church for? We're not a large church. I mean, if you think about it, compared to the 100,000 people in Ku-ring-gai who don't sing songs of salvation, we're pretty small. And if you think about where we're headed, to becoming a crowd that no one can count, a multitude in heaven, we're still pretty small. And so I've stopped calling us a large church. I'll call us a medium-sized church because we're still a little bigger than the ones down the road, but we've got so much more opportunity to grow. May God extend his salvation. So what are we then? Who are we? If we're not a large church, what defines us? What makes us who we are? And this is kind of what our focus is in this series. This is us. What is us? Who are we? I was part of some meetings last year to think about what is us, what is Christchurch Mornings, how we differentiated from other congregations, what's kind of unique about Christchurch Mornings. And there's a few things we discovered as we talked it through. The first thing we discovered is that we're actually not that different to the other services at church here, because we're on about the same vision. So up on the screen, you'll be familiar with this, that all of our congregations are building wholehearted disciples of Jesus, and we're working on the same 5 outcomes. They're working towards the same 5 things. So we've got a lot in common with the other congregations at Christchurch and Ives. Also, it's worth admitting that we've got a lot in common with a lot of churches around the world, because in the end, we're part of God's work. We're part of what God's building. And if we think about who's on the throne in Revelation 7, it's not us on the throne, it's God's on the throne. And God's doing a work of building something way bigger than us, and we're just a small part of God's work. So we're part of an international church, an international community. They're all working towards the same thing, which means that it might not be that different if you walk to a church down the road. So what are we then, and how is Christchurch Mornings unique? Well, the first thing to comment on, especially in relation to our other Christchurch services, is the children and youth that we have as part of Christchurch Mornings. This is the only congregation at Christchurch with a children's and youth program. And so that's obviously distinct. And if we go back in our history, at COVID, we took 3 congregations that had kids programs and combined them together to become one congregation with a bigger kids program. And one of the things that I love is that my 13-year-old son's able to go to youth group with 15 boys in the same year group as him because of the size of the youth group and the kids program, which is quite distinct from opportunities in other churches. A lot of churches have a youth group of 15 people. It's a privilege that my son has youth group with 15 boys, and then there's the girls, and then there's all the other year groups. And right now we heard that, these 96 kids and youth leaders who are on a training weekend, being trained to do the best that they could do to run a great kids and youth program. We've got a children's minister full-time, a youth minister full-time, and they work with a couple of apprentices who are training in children's and youth ministry. We've got SRE in schools. We've got all this stuff going on out of our kids ministry, which is a real privilege to be part of. And it's nice to think that we've got a whole group of 96 people here training right now in leadership, when that's bigger than a lot of congregations around. We've got that many youth leaders, that many kids leaders, and that's not all of them. Praise God for what we have here. So who are we? We're a congregation of Christchurch and Ives with children and youth. And that means a lot of us are in the hustle and bustle and squeeze of life, of parenting and raising children. That's kind of what distinguishes this congregation. The second thing is we're a congregation with a Chinese ministry with Mandarin speaking interpretation. It's pretty cool what we've got going on here, because there's a few local churches around that are doing like Chinese congregations, Chinese church in Mandarin. But it's more rare to have an integrated congregation where you listen by interpretation, and we all gather together with multiple tongues in one congregation, and then you get to go out into your smaller groups with your heart language to study the Bible. That's the Mandarin Fellowship. A lot of churches in the area are trying to do Chinese ministry well, because Chinese people are moving into the area, and I'm sure you've noticed this trend. And it's because of the schools in the area, and that's one of the factors. I was talking to someone who just got back, Lindy just got back from China, and she was telling me during the week, I finally understand why so many Chinese people are so committed to education. And it's because, she explained, in China, the government make it mandatory schooling up to year 9, and then at year 9 you sit an exam to work out whether you're going to go into the vocational line or you're going to go into the academic line. And half the people get to go into the academic line, and it's those half that then get the opportunity to apply for university in year 12. So there's this competitive desire to have the opportunity to go to university as young, going right back into the year 9 exam. And when you come to Australia and you've got that education mentality, competing with 1 billion people to try and get into university, that's why there's such a focus. And when you move to St Ives, well, we've got a reputation in Ku-ring-gai area for having good schools, so we'll expect to see Chinese people moving into the community. Now, it's our privilege to welcome Chinese people into the salvation of God. Now, it's our privilege to welcome people who are Chinese moving into our area and to share together in church so that we can all sing one song of praise. And it's so special that we can include the entire household, because the Chinese household in St. Ives is grandparent, parent, and child and grandchildren. The children go to school in English, speak English. They can join our kids program. The parents are bilingual. They help run our interpretation. And the grandparents are Chinese speaking, and so they go to our Mandarin fellowship and they get to join with their children and grandchildren in church. As a whole household, we offer the interpretation. Plus, there's the Mandarin fellowship for that deeper, word-inspired community where they can study in their heart language. I say they, but it's we, because we are one and we're together right now. It's very exciting to be part of this ministry. So these are the two distinguishing features of Christchurch Mornings. And when we had those meetings last year to figure out, well, therefore, what is Christchurch Mornings, we came up with these two values: strengthening households, gathering multitudes. Strengthening households ties in closely with our children's, youth and families demographic, but what we like about that phrasing is it's not just about running good kids programs, it's not just about a church that runs good ministries, it's actually about strengthening households to raise children in the faith. It's a partnership. Strengthening households is what's a distinctive value of Christchurch Mornings. The other thing is gathering multitudes ties in with the Chinese community as we draw people together, but it's bigger than a program, because our goal is not just to run good Chinese ministry programs. The reason we do that is because we're gathering multitudes to be part of God's salvation. So this is us. This is Christchurch Mornings. This is what we love. This is what we value. This is what we're working towards. And this is why we're doing this series during these school holidays, a 3-week series where this week I'm speaking on gathering multitudes, and then the next 2 weeks, Jesse and Pete, children and youth ministry team, they'll speak about strengthening households. That's what this series is. The reason I chose Revelation chapter 7 is because that's where we get the language gathering multitudes. That's what God's working towards, and it's our privilege to be part of it. At Christchurch Mornings, we're on about gathering multitudes because we're not yet a gathering of multitudes. We're on about gathering multitudes because we are not yet a gathering of all nations, tribes, and languages. And there are 100,000 people of Ku-ring-gai who have not yet experienced songs of God's salvation. A lot of them are children and youth. A lot of them come from Chinese families. But there's also other cultures too. So wouldn't it be good if we could expand? Wouldn't it be good if we could include more people? I know that there's a lot of Iranian people that have come through English classes in the last couple of years. A number of them have been baptized. Wouldn't it be great if we could provide more opportunities in ministry for Iranian people? Wouldn't it be good if we could expand to more cultures and more people? How can we grow to be more and more part of the global work that God is doing in the world? Because as it says in our passage, He is gathering a multitude from every nation, tribe, people, and language. We think we're multicultural because we've got a Chinese ministry. We're not multicultural compared to what's up ahead in God's multitude with all tribes, nations, and languages. Sometimes we think we're a big church. We're not a big church compared to what God's building. He's gathering a multitude. So let's not settle with where we're at. Let's not settle with who's already in the room. Let's keep gathering more and more people into God's family. Sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking, I don't really like growth. I don't really like change. I don't really like having to meet all these different new people all the time. I'd rather keep it simple. I'd rather keep it small. And sometimes we would rather not cross-cultural barriers, so we resist change and we resist growth. But instead of resisting what God is doing in the world, I think it's better to find our home within it. How do we create a sense of home within the multitude that God is gathering? I love what membership are doing. We talk about a membership team at Christchurch and Ives. They're trying to help us at Christchurch build this place to feel like home. So they talk about the front door, they talk about the hallway, they talk about the lounge room. And when someone walks in the front door, they want to help you walk into the lounge room. We have lunches for people that are new. in homes where you get to meet people and meet the ministry team. And at that location, we talk about small groups, joining small groups, growth groups, so that you can be part of smaller communities where you can know people. Because the challenge of joining a multitude of a huge gathering is that you can never expect to know everyone, and you're always going to be meeting new people. So it becomes really important that you're part of a small group, because it's the rhythms of deeper connection in the small groups and the larger songs of praise on Sundays that bind together a community of where you are at home. If you grew up in a smaller church, there can be a bit of a culture shock in a church that's continuing to grow. There's 100 more adults this year than there was this time last year. And so we have been growing under God, and there's a bit of culture shock associated with growth. Crowds themselves are not opposed to community. Crowds themselves are not a contradiction to community. What's important is that we have rhythms of smaller communities and bigger communities within this large gathering of God's people. We know it's possible because God's not just Lord, but because He's our Father in heaven. And what He's doing is gathering multitudes, but it's not an impersonal gathering because He's a personal Father. He's drawing individuals who He knows, each person, the hairs on your head, He loves us individually. And so He's creating a church with a culture where it's possible to have a multitude as well as intimacy and unity and closeness and depth. All this is a way of me encouraging us, and I'm the mission director, so I'm always trying to help us lift our eyes up and out. It's all a way of me encouraging us not to settle on who we are now, but to make more room for more people, to invite more people, include more people. Let's go out and invite all the people in the surrounding suburbs to come and enjoy what we've come to enjoy. Because in the end, this is about the salvation of God and wanting to include more people in what we've got. I want to finish really by drawing in on this theme about salvation. Because in the end, that's what this is all about. From our reading on the screen, salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. This is about sharing good things with the people around us. This is about involving people in the songs that we sing because we're happy with what we've received from God, His salvation. And we want more people to have what we've got, and we want more Yolandas to smile at her baptism. We want more people like Yolanda to be inviting more people so that they can also join us in the songs of celebration. And you might be here today for the first time because you've been gathered by members of our church. You might have even just walked in. You might be watching online. And I just want to take a minute to say that that's what we actually are on about. We want more people to join us. We want to include you. We want to welcome you. And we want you to be part with us in songs of salvation. We really believe that in the end, there'll be a large gathering at the throne of God where we can walk through the gates, up the mountain to meet with God, and under His protection, He is going to wipe away all of the suffering, all of the death, and all of the tears from our eyes. And we want you to have that. We want you to be part of that. How can anyone have that? How can anyone meet with God? This is the problem that we have to face, is that no one actually is worthy to go up to God. No one's really fit to face God. No one's clothed to walk into the presence of God. And that's why it is even better that we can sing songs of salvation, because that's what it is, it's salvation. We're saved to be able to go into the presence of God. We're saved. How are we saved? A lot of the people who met God in the Bible fell on their faces and said, "I'm not worthy, have mercy on me." That's the trouble. We're not worthy to go up to God. But what we read in Revelation 7 is that there's a multitude of people who are saved and wearing white robes. Where did their white robes come from? They came from the salvation of God. As we look to the end of Revelation 7, it talks about washing their robes and making them white in the blood of the Lamb. This is a really poetic way of talking about what Jesus did on the cross 2,000 years ago to give us white robes, to wash us clean, to take away the things that prevent us from coming up to God. The salvation of God is free and available because Jesus paid the price, so that you can wash your robes in the blood of Jesus. Is a really graphic and poetic way of saying, come to Jesus because he's got unlimited supply of white robes. And if you want to come up to God, then come and grab a white robe from Jesus. Do you want to join us in songs of salvation? All you need to do is ask Jesus for a white robe. Have you already come? Well, then go. Go out there and gather more people, because that's what we are at Christchurch Mornings. We're a people who are gathering multitudes, and it's our privilege to be involved in our Father's work, because that's what he's building. And if we can play a small part in that, what a great joy. So how can you get involved?